Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Making It. So, I've recently been hiring scriptwriters for my new scriptwriting agency. And over the last couple of years, the three of us have had various bits of experience hiring for creative teams. So, today we discuss how to hire and how to get hired in the creator economy. Hope you enjoy.
So, George, you've had to do some hiring recently. Tell us about it.
Yes. So, kicked off the agency a couple of months ago. And at the very start, there was this kind of pressure period where I needed to try and find good people because I had a couple of people in mind already that I knew that I could vouch for, and I knew I wanted to write with me / for me. But then there were a few gaps that I needed to plug, and while I ended up with a lot of really, really promising applications, I think there were some people who, because I needed them right now, there were little things that I spotted in how they'd filled out their applications, how they came across in those applications, that made me think, yes, you were the person that I really need to plug into this system that I'm creating fast and be good off the bat. And so I think it'd be interesting to kind of talk about what those things are that you might look out for when if you're hiring for positions like that, and how to kind of see through beyond what the questions are you're asking on the form, and to see like what is this person like underneath, and are they going to be someone who's a fit for what I need. But then also to talk about the questions themselves as well, because I think it can be, you've got so many directions you could go with a hiring form, and it can sometimes feel like, what do I actually need to ask, and what do I need to know about these people in order to verify whether or not they're someone who's going to fit in with my business. And obviously, you two have done hiring, to various degrees as well, and I think in like different areas. So I think it would just be interesting to talk about what we've seen and what we're looking for and that kind of thing when it comes to hiring people.
So far you've only hired scriptwriters, I assume. You haven't looked at any other type of team member, and they're all freelancers, I guess.
Yes. So all freelancers, all writers. One of the writers was starting to move into a kind of oversight type role, or at least to try them out in that kind of role alongside the script writing, which again is I feel like I'm taking shots in the dark with a lot of this. I don't really know what I'm doing, and a lot of it is kind of just getting a sense of people once they're in, and just noticing, skills that people have. So that determines which clients you put them on, but then also you start to think, oh, okay, this person has maybe displayed like this particular trait, and I think maybe that would lend itself really well to, plugging in as a kind of oversight type of role. And I suppose that's the point that I'm at now, really. And that this maybe branches into a wider conversation around like just scaling up a business and growing it outwards. Is like, not only are you trying to look for these base roles where you need the people who can physically do the skill that you're selling, but then you have to start thinking about, okay, do I need people who can manage things and people who can oversee comms? And there's like all of this stuff. So it does feel a little bit like almost laying the track as the train is moving, trying to work out the best way to do this.
I feel like a lot of businesses like that in a way.
Yeah.
So how many people have you hired so far?
So five people in a freelance capacity, and one of those kind of subbing into to an oversight role. But I think, there's this like question always of kind of scalability versus sustainability, and like how best to expand what you're doing in a way that takes you to a point you want to be at, and in a way that's comfortable for you to do. And I think I've realized now, like this is about the limit for me as someone who is overseeing these, essentially 5 different writers doing 5 different clients. That's multiple script reviews a week and communicating with all these different people. For me, that feels about the limit of what I can reasonably do as a person. So that's where the additional kind of getting other people in with other skills might start to become more prevalent.
So what are some of the characteristics that you're looking for? And what are some of the characteristics that you're seeing that you're thinking, okay, maybe you're not a good fit for working with me?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I should caveat this whole thing with the fact that I, possibly with a bit of luck and a bit of judgment, the 5 people that I have hired are all really, really good. And I'm really, really, some of them I already knew would be good. And then some of them, it was like, I feel like you're going to be really good at this. And it's proven that they have been. And the number one thing, and what makes my life so easy because across this whole thing, it's quite busy and it's quite stressful. But the thing that makes my life easy is that they're all so communicative, and I never feel in the dark about what's going on. I always know what stage they're at with different scripts, and they'll be honest if I say, can we try and get this done for tomorrow, and they're like, feasibly yes, but it probably won't be as good. I appreciate knowing that, and then I can say, well, fine, just let's take 2 days, and the product will be better. So that's the really kind of key thing, is just in like how they communicate. On the other side of things, and I think what maybe let some people down who did apply for this to work for the agency. Well, there's a lot of stuff really, and maybe this could kind of branch into the discussion around like how you set up the application process in the first place. But one thing, and I'd be really interested to know if you guys had a similar kind of thing in the hiring that you've done for like your own businesses and generally for other businesses that we've worked in. One thing that immediately separated a bunch of like obvious yeses from obvious nos were the inclusion of these additional tasks, which you don't necessarily say you have to do, but it's kind of like you really ought to do this if you want to kind of show up in the best way that you can. And I wonder if you guys have kind of had experience of that, and like what the rate of people that actually bother to do those extra things is.
Interesting. I don't have experience of kind of including optional extras, but in my experience, you can kind of tell by how much effort someone has put into the questions anyway. With writers, it's particularly easy to both get a feel for what they're like and how much effort they're willing to put in by if they leave you like 3 sentences on why you would be good for this role versus, a whole 500 words that have been carefully thought out. So, but I like the idea of optional extras on the one hand, but on the other hand, I guess it feels a little bit like a trap, a trick. But I guess it is. I suppose that's legitimate. you want people who are going to go the extra mile, right?
Yeah. So whenever I've hired people, I've never put in optional extras, but you do find that some applicants will take the extra leap with their application. And that for me is always like a huge green flag, because it shows that someone's committed, especially if the extra work that they have done has been done to a high standard. There's been a few people who sort of just stood out because of the fact that they did that. My video editor, she kind of, from what I remember, put together like a small edit based on other footage that was already available. And then that was just so much better than everyone else who'd applied. And I was like, okay, well, that's clearly someone who cares about their work, who really wants this opportunity. And then I'm hiring her. So she's very good. But that really helped her stand out from maybe like 150, 200 people that applied. So there was a lot of people that I'd shortlisted, but because she did that and no one else did, that immediately made her seem more valuable. And I've also had people who've just reached out to me in the DMs, and I get so many cold DMs now of like people trying to help, but they're usually very copy and paste. They don't really seem like as much of an effort. So you can tell that this is usually just like some automated bot that's doing it. And then sometimes you can tell when someone's reached out, but they've been thoughtful. They've mentioned things that they would only know if they listen to the podcast, for example. And sometimes they will say, I heard you mention this particular thing, this problem that you were having. Here's a solution that I've put together, completely for free. If you want any additional help, here's my contact details. I've worked with people because of that approach. And so, yeah, I've never like purposely said, here's some optional stuff that you can do. I think the best applicants know that, and they will just take it upon themselves to make themselves stand out and get a better chance of getting the job.
Mm. Yeah, I think what you mentioned about problems is really important. Most creators, I think, when hiring, are not hiring from a place of like lots of power and security, and we know that we will eventually have lots of work for this role. It's going to expand. It's more like we really need this person. Like we needed them yesterday. We want someone to start doing it now. So if you look at a job application as almost like a cry for help from the person who's hiring, and then you think like, what's the problem that I need to be solving? What are they struggling with? What do they want to level up? And you just see yourself as like, how can I be the solution to that problem? And how can I offer even more of a solution? And how can I be even better than what they're looking for, I think you're off to a good start.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that I look for from a characteristic point of view of when hiring someone is, do they take the initiative? Do they take things upon themselves? And I've always found that even when I was an employee working with other team members, it's always the people who just had that idea and did it anyway, as opposed to, oh, let me just do exactly what I'm told. Those who go above and beyond tend to just be the standout star, right, amongst other employees and candidates. And so, yeah, for me, that's always like an important thing of like a characteristic that I look forward to in a particular person.
I agree. And I think what I noticed off the back of my application, so for context, there was like, I suppose the most tricksy thing in there was this little thing in the actual description. And I remember when I was applying to work with Ed from Film Booth, like back before I'd worked with him at all, he did the same thing, where in the explanation of the role, there's like midway through a sentence, the sentence then basically curtails itself and moves into another sentence that's like, oh, and by the way, this is actually a hidden message. If you've actually read this, please write the word whatever in the final box to prove that you've read all of this. And like that immediately, it's shocking how many people haven't read the whole thing, because like 50% gone. Not that I saw it like that, because there was some applications that I thought, oh, look, they're interesting enough. But it was like you're hanging on for dear life if you've missed that bit, because it just shows you haven't read it. And it's such an attention to detail role, like that's one thing. But the thing I was going to say that, off the back of your point was about that going that extra mile and being willing to kind of do things proactively. Two of the questions I put in my application were basically, watch this video and tell me why retention dropped, or even where retention dropped, and give your kind of reasoning for why this was. And that was like that was the differentiator between who I was like continue to think about and eventually would say yes to, or those who I just thought there's not a chance, sadly, is because even when people got it wrong, and I would say maybe 50%, 40% got it spot on, but I'm sure of the people that I've hired, like at least one of them didn't necessarily get the exact right thing, but they were so forthcoming with their feedback on other things about the video that could have been good, and things that I'd even missed, where I was like, okay, that is actually, funnily enough, another point where retention drops, like not the biggest point, but you've provided some really, really interesting thoughts about why that could have been. And that has really carried forward into how we've been working with the clients, where, like I've thrown a brief at a couple of the writers on a couple of occasions where they've come back and have literally said, I think this video idea is bad and I think we should change it completely in these ways, or these titles don't work at all, or we should reframe it in this way, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like all this stuff that, that's what you want. And you don't want someone who's necessarily just a yes person who is going to be like, yep, okay, sure, I'll do it. You want people who are really thinking about this stuff. And that comes across so clearly in an application form. If you're someone who's really thinking this stuff through and giving thoughtful responses, you can tell that person a mile off from someone who's just like, yep, I think it was this, or the editing was bad, therefore the retention was bad, or something like that.
I think that one of the best things about being an employer and getting an employee is that you get to buy back your time and your energy, and you can focus on other important parts of the business. And so when you have these employees that take intuition and spot things that you don't see because you don't have, 100% of the focus on exactly what they're doing, that's the dream, right? Is to just have someone who's like a plug and play, like they just come into the business, they can instantly do everything, if not more, and you haven't got to always manage them. But obviously there is a fine balance there, because you don't want to give full autonomy where you don't know what they're doing, how long they're spending on tasks. But there's got to be like that characteristic of someone who goes above and beyond, because really that I think is how you stand out. And if you start to build this agency and have, different levels within this hierarchy within your company, and you want someone to be a manager to the other writers, out of your 5 writers that you currently have, it's who is the person who's standing out, who is going above and beyond and showing that they have these skills, and will be able to spot those things in other script writers that I either can't do or don't have the time and focus to be able to look at their scripts. That's immediately going to be that person who gets promoted. And I think that works for almost all businesses. It's who can do the best work in the shortest amount of time and do more of it.
What I'm thinking also, what's made almost everyone who I've ended up hiring when I've been involved in a hiring process has had a great body of work, like portfolio. So I'm thinking off the top of my head, editors with great show reels, writers who have like a Twitter presence where when you click on their Twitter, then you start reading, you're like, yes, this person kind of gets it, or I want that energy. So I think, yeah, for most creative roles, you'd be well served by sprucing up your portfolio as well. There's the usual advice about, just make something. You don't have to work for other people for free, but you should just start making something to show that you can do things, as opposed to just waiting until you get given a job to start creating.
Yeah, this is something I've been thinking about recently, and how resumes are becoming just irrelevant. I think that if you had two options between someone who had a normal resume listing all of their experiences and someone who had, if they were a scriptwriter, if we take George's example, they had a Twitter profile that had 50,000 followers on it, and they tweeted consistently about scriptwriting. It's like, that person is way more interesting than, I don't even want to open up the resume of someone else. And maybe that's the correct thing to do, but I think someone who's gained a following, who's tweeting out valuable things, is way more likely to get the job. The same thing of, like, if you were looking for a thumbnail designer, someone who has an Instagram page that has 100,000 followers on it, showing off all of their designs in their portfolio, is way more employable than someone who's like, here's my resume and here's where I went to university and here are some things that I've achieved at a graphic design agency. It's like, I want to see what you can actually produce. And I think, especially in like the creative economy and the creative work, a portfolio is just way better. But if you can build a following around it, I just feel like your personal brand is on a completely different level and you stand out amongst so many people. And I think, when you get to like high levels of in business, people do not say, let me see your CV. It comes down to characteristics, behavior traits, their portfolio, the relationship that you already have with that person who's hiring. And yeah, I just think that the old resume, write a cover letter, the old age way of doing it, I think is just becoming really old fashioned and outdated.
George, I'm curious. Is there anything that you wish, so looking for strategic advice for other people hiring, is there anything you wish you'd done differently or better or sooner in the process that would have sped things up or maybe led to better applications?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if money were no object, the thing that would have saved time would have been giving people trial scripts before speaking to them on the phone. Because while personality is a big thing, and like you were saying, Jamie, those kind of personality traits, they can come through, they come through on the initial application and B, are very important. There was a point at which I was like, right, okay, I have a short list of maybe, I think it was like 10 people or something. I'm going to speak to them on the phone, see what the vibes are like. So I remember that's something that Ali and co basically said that was what they were doing with us towards the end of the application. It was just like, come for lunch and let's talk. At the time it was like, why? And then later it was just to see if it was a good fit personality wise. But then the problem was, everyone I spoke to was like, oh yeah, they're really decent, like they're nice people and we get on well and we can talk well, so now I'll give you all. I was thinking I might halve the number of people then that I would give a trial script to, but I basically gave everyone a trial script because everyone was really nice. And then it was at the trial script stage that it was then easier to think, right, okay, these are probably the best 5 scripts that I've received, and so it went from there. But at the time for me, I didn't have loads of disposable capital to pay. I wanted to pay fairly for the trial scripts, and so that would be what I would say. If money is no object and you have enough disposable, business liquid capital that you can put into that, getting people to do a task, and beyond, like I said, the application had watch this video, tell me why it didn't do well. Get them to do the thing that you are going to be paying them to do as early as you can and can afford to do. That would have been useful for me. Yeah, I would say that's probably it.
Something I noticed looking at MrBeast's hiring process, when he's hiring for, I think, editors and producers, but it may just be producers, he asks them to send in like a 2-minute video about themselves with editing that shows their personality and creativity. And I think that's That's obviously a big ask, but MrBeast can, of course, make big asks. And the interesting thing about that is that it combines the two things that you said, George. It combines the vibe check with the show us what you can do with your work, which I think is really interesting. And I think if you're not sure where to start with building a portfolio of something, then maybe just making a video introducing yourself to the world and letting people know what your vibe is, that would be great.
I agree with that fully, and I think there was one person who I ended up hiring who did that, and not obviously the role is not an editing role, but what he did in his application video was that he deliberately introduced himself and structured the information in a way that showed that he was clearly really familiar with all of my stuff. The way he was setting up like little payoffs within this 90-second video, I watched it and I was like punching the air because it was just so obvious that he was on it and he'd taken the time to do it and he had listened, and it was just everything that I kind of would have wanted to see. And so yeah, that's like you say, you can be creative with that initial application and sort of show not only am I a nice person, but I can do the thing that you're asking me to do.
Can I turn the conversation in a different direction? So we talked about how to filter the people that you get to apply, but in my experience, one of the biggest problems is, how do we find the people to get them to apply or to reach out to them? Like, how do we fill our bucket full of good applicants to process? So in my experience, that's obviously harder for in-person roles. So like, say you're hiring someone as your kind of videographer. What are your guys' experiences with generating leads for hiring?
I think a large part of it comes down to, are you an attractive place to work? Or if you're not a company and you're an individual, is your personal brand particularly strong? So I think depending on, the YouTuber or the Instagram or whoever, right? The bigger their brand is, the more exposure they get to more individuals who could potentially want to work with them, who might be more familiar with that type of work. And that, I think, is how you can hire very good talent. And even if you didn't have a huge following of those particular individuals, of like maybe, let's say it's not a thumbnail designer or scriptwriter, but it's more like, you want a director for your business, someone who's going to come in who's had like 30 years in another industry. They might not know who you are, but because of the size of your following, you're way more likely to be able to be attractive to them who want to come into the creator economy space. And so I think the more amount of time that you can pour into your personal brand, the better. We were recording these podcasts 11 weeks ahead of time. And when our first episode went live, we were speaking about the problems that we were having in our business. And one of the problems I'd mentioned, people then started to DM me and said, hey, I saw in the podcast you were struggling with this problem. Here's some solutions. I'd love to work with you. And that was really interesting. And I was like, okay, that's one of the benefits of having a podcast where we talk about these kind of things. People are aware of how they can help. Whereas if we didn't have this podcast, if I didn't have a personal brand or I didn't tweet about these things, people wouldn't know. And so then all would be on me to kind of pop that job posting out on Twitter or LinkedIn or on a job website. But again, if I don't have that huge following, I'm not going to get massive exposure to hire the best talent because they're not even going to see it. So I think a large part of it just comes down to, are you an attractive place to work? Are you an interesting person? Do you have people who are familiar with your work? Especially when it comes down to things like script writing or writing tweets. It's like, how does this person write? Am I familiar? Do I like their writing style? Can I write in that particular way? If the answer is yes, you're probably pretty rare. And a lot of creators will pay you for that particular skill because, yes, it's fairly simple to get someone who can write an article, a script, a tweet, but is it good? Is it in your tone of voice? If someone can do that and show it to you, it's game on, right? Like you're going to hire them.
So if we're talking to a smaller creator who maybe has more disposable cash, let's say a business person who wants to get big on YouTube, wants to hire a team, wants to grow fast, but doesn't have that big personal brand, that means that they can just send out a tweet or a community post and just say, hey, I'm looking for writers. Apply in the link below. I think I would start off with saying like a few of the things that are getting off the ground are like YouTube jobs, the website, or YT jobs, as it legally has to be known. There are some competitors to that jobs board, like Roster is a new competitor. What are people's options beyond that?
I think if you're a small business and you don't have much of a following, really the only way that you can attract high quality talent is through money, right? Or you have a very interesting mission. But again, it's like, how unique is your business? Are you really going to be able to attract people because of where you want to go? Some people it's going to be yes, but for the majority of people, it's going to be no. You know, if you're a local business, and let's say you're a plumber and you had a plumbing academy online where you taught people how to become plumbers, and that's how you're monetizing it, and you wanted to create YouTube videos teaching people to get them to go purchase your course where you're teaching how to become a plumber, it's not particularly attractive, you know, business model that a lot of young, fresh and up and coming script writers or video editors are going to work for. But if you're like, hey, I'm paying $5,000, you know, per 30-minute script, that all of a sudden is very interesting to a lot of people. But again, you're potentially putting in the wrong.
Yeah, George is looking happy.
Yeah, exactly. So you
drive up those prices, Jamie.
Get the cream of the crop with George Blackman coming in, and it's like guaranteed million views. But yeah, like the more you can incentivize people with money, I think is like the best thing that a small business can do. But again, if you're a small business, how much money do you actually have? Are you going to take this seriously? I didn't really feel that a lot of people should be outsourcing early on, unless they understand those skills themselves and what it is that they're looking for. Because I've come across these small business types in the past where they're like, oh, I got a thumbnail designer, and they paid like £10 or like, you know, $15, and that they think it's really good, but it's not, and it doesn't get them the clicks. And then they're scratching their head, why is this not working? And it's like, well, you don't really know why that thumbnail does or doesn't work. And it's like, they should become the creator and actually produce that for a set period of time, learn the skills so they can actually create a good brief to someone that they want to outsource to. And only over time should they then start to hire. And I think when they do hire, it's not about finding the best person. I think it's just about getting someone who's good enough and getting that ball rolling. And so you don't have this on-off approach of your content. Just being slowly consistent and getting those videos out, and over time, starting to hire better, especially when your business starts to make more money, is more important than how do we get the best thumbnail designer? How do we get the best video editor? Because you can very quickly bankrupt yourself as a small business trying to hire every sort of slot in the YouTube creation process.
And I think that's really good advice. If anyone is listening who has not been doing YouTube for a long time, is not very deep in the space, but is looking to hire, just like be aware that you might be hiring someone who charges quite a lot, but doesn't do a great job. So I would say try and get second opinions on their work as much as you can from other people, maybe even, I'm not sure exactly how one would go about that, but maybe if you've got friends who are more into social media, just ask them their opinion. And that will save you from being stuck thinking, why are my videos getting no traction when, for example, your thumbnail editor really is winging it a bit.
There's also a framework that I really like, which is called the 10-80-10 framework, which is where you do the first 10% of the work, then whoever it is that you're working with does 80%, and then you do the final 10. So it might be like, if I'm working on a thumbnail, it's like I come up with what I want the words to say on the thumbnail. Maybe I do some research. I find some thumbnails that I think look particularly good. And I'm like, that's the 10%. Here's the brief. Here's a little bit of work. Here's maybe a mock-up that I've drawn on a piece of paper. That's kind of what I'm looking for. They do the 80% of getting it to the final position. Then you review it in that final 10% and say, actually, I think it would be better if we said this, or let's change that font, let's change those colors. Or can you just send me the Photoshop file or the Canva file, and I'll do that final 10% myself and make those slight tweaks. That is a way more efficient version of working than, hey, I want a thumbnail, this is the title, thanks. Because that's how I see so many people work with thumbnail designers. And I'm like, you're just going to get really bad looking thumbnails with that approach of, here's the title, please make me something. Like, implement 10-80-10, and everything that you do would immediately be so much better. And that applies to things like, you know, a Twitter ghostwriter, video editing, and everything else really in the creative world.
That's a really good idea. That sounds great for tasks as well, for hiring tasks, or application tasks, because then you get to see what George was saying, which is like, who is pushing who's just following what you're saying to the letter and delivering something that's just like okay, versus someone who's experimenting a bit, maybe giving you different versions to choose from. So if I was hiring a thumbnail designer, they said, hey, I read the brief, I came up with this design which fits the brief exactly, but here are some variations, and I also had this completely different idea for where you could take it that might be more effective. And I haven't worked on that yet because that would take me more time. But if you'd like me to explore that, let me know. I'd be like, yes, thank you. That would be the dream.
Gwilym, I'm curious because I know that we spent a little bit of time in this conversation talking about hiring for, our own businesses. But I know you, of all three of us, have probably done the most in terms of hiring for creative teams that you're a part of, and doing that work with and on the behalf of some large creators that you've worked with. And I wonder over time what you've kind of learned about the entire process, and kind of maybe how your approach has changed over time.
Yes. So I think what I've learned from working with a few kind of bigger creators who want to grow their team kind of quickly and have the money to do so, I think the main thing I've learned is that it's worth holding out for someone really good to come along, and not like settling. I think there's some advice I read somewhere that you as a business owner, you should be spending like, I don't know, some large percentage of your time, like 20%, always constantly looking for hiring and new people. But yeah, if you hire someone really good, then you'll be thinking, oh my God, if we'd had this person for the last year, like what would life have been like? So yeah, I feel stronger now than I did further back in the past. Like one should not settle for something that one is not fully happy with, because there are so many people in the world. Like the people who are in your inbox with the applications, they are just not anywhere close to representing all the people who might be willing to do the job for you, who just didn't see it that day or didn't get around to applying, or unless you're hiring for something extremely specialized, in which case, yeah, sure.
What's the point at which you, because especially in all of this, right, like this is all such new stuff that we're talking about, and a lot of the time we're maybe talking about freelance work, and this is all a bizarre sort of sector of the world of human work. When we're talking about old school hiring and firing, if someone's not pulling their weight, it's often, especially in corporate stuff, it can be really difficult to ease somebody out. And there are lots and lots of okay, we'll try this for a couple of weeks, you're on special measures for a while, we'll see how you do. Okay, you haven't met it this time, you have 3 more chances, and then we'll blah 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 blah. I wonder, in this world, like what you're kind of, what happens if you get somebody through the door who you're like, oh, I thought they were going to be great, and then it turns out they're not so much. What the new age YouTube version of that process looks like, where you're either trying to get them up to speed or deciding maybe this isn't the right fit.
I guess it depends on your runway, like how quickly they need to get up to speed, how much time you want to give them. I've always found that the longer you work with someone, the better that they get. But they have to obviously have a basic level of understanding and foundational skills to be able to do those tasks, right? Like as long as they're showing that they're improving over time and they're listening to the feedback that you're giving them, is then very quickly to kind of see the trajectory that they're going to go on and how quickly they learn and implement the feedback that you give them. If you find that that person hasn't done so and they're remaining the same or potentially even getting worse, then I think it becomes quite a simple question to answer of this isn't going to work out. But there's certainly things that you can put in place. Like when I've worked with people, it's like there's a 1-month trial period where we're kind of working together, they get paid. But if at the end of those 30 days, we haven't really seen much of an improvement, then it's easier to kind of take that break and kind of say, sorry, you didn't put past the probation period, and end things there. I've also worked with people for 3 months where they've had a probation period. And that's, I prefer that because it gives them more stability. They know that they don't have 4 weeks and it's all over. There's like 3 months. I also kind of can see how they're progressing over that time. And I think that's the best approach. If you then hire them full time and then actually they're not that good, I think that's more on you as the person who hired them rather than them. But again, it also depends on like when you say hiring, are we just outsourcing with a contractor who's doing one particular task? Because if that's the case, then the point of a freelance contractor is that there's flexibility there in terms of how many hours they might work one week to the next, compared to someone who's a full-time employee, which is a completely different kettle of fish of how you let someone go past that probation period.
Yeah, I think if you've gone through the whole process of actually hiring someone full-time, they've done all the trial tasks, you've spoken to them in an interview, and then you hire them. And then usually I think most countries have, like a probation period, and they've gone for a whole month working with you. And then now you're past that, you decided, yes, they're a good idea. We want this person on our team. And then you're thinking, oh, they're not such a good fit. I think you probably need to approach it. And it's not for structural reasons like, shit, we just don't have the work for you anymore. But it's rather like, I don't think you're a good cultural fit, or you're not doing the work well enough. I think it's probably good to approach it as like that you as the employer maybe have made a mistake, and that it's like a problem solving thing between the two of you. If you kind of know it's not going to work out, it's probably kinder to like cut it short faster rather than dragging things out with a kind of, oh, we're not sure you're quite right, but we're going to put you through this process where you feel like for a month that you're just like the shittiest employee on the team. Like, I'd probably say like have the humility to recognize that they might work great in some other environment, and that give them time if you think that it's useful, but otherwise just don't drag it out, because it's worse for them as well as for you.
Yeah, I've seen some people have, I think they're called PIPs, like performance improvement plan or something like this, which is kind of like, yeah, you're probably going to get fired soon because you're not performing very well, but here's like this plan of how you can improve. And I think, I don't know how I feel about them in a way, because it's kind of like the work that you're producing and the feedback you get from your manager is essentially a performance improvement plan, because it's like, you didn't do this thing well, here's how you could do it. If that next time you didn't do it well, you're already showing that you're not necessarily going to get better. But yeah, I mean, I just find it strange, because if I was an employee and I got given one of those, I'd think, oh, like it already sounds like I'm running on a very thin line here. And I don't know how much my heart would be in the work or wanting to work for that company. I think maybe I should go elsewhere. But again, I think it comes down to that person and their character of like, does someone see that and say, okay, I'm not doing well, I really better improve here, and take that performance improvement plan to the next level and really crush it and show how good they are, and take themselves to that next level where they really need to be. That, I guess, is like the benefit. I don't know. I just don't really like the idea of those. But at the same time, I think just getting sacked out of nowhere is also not ideal. I'm glad I don't have to deal with these kind of things.
Yeah, the advice, I don't know if this is sound advice, but what I heard was, I think someone saying, if you get put on some sort of plan like that, that's your signal to immediately do the minimum amount of work you possibly can for that company. Like, don't invest any more time in it. Wind down your time, wait to be given your notice period, and reinvest all your time and energy into like looking at other jobs, making your portfolio look better, all that stuff, because it's probably not going to work out.
Damn. A crushing
again,
final
I feel
note.
like this is just what I've learned from just my couple years in creator economy. I'm very aware that if I'd been running a business for 10 years and had to do loads of this stuff, I would probably have a very different perspective.
I think that's one thing I was talking about. Just a general thought that like there's such a difference between this like the entry level base skill that we are sort of doing for the clients that we work for, whether that is YouTube producing or thumbnail designing or writing or whatever. And it's like, as soon as you go up one rung and you're now like, okay, now I'm trying to hire for these same positions, suddenly your entire life and job and skill set flips on its head, and you're just doing stuff that is not related to that skill really at all anymore. And that's kind of where I feel like I'm at now, where I was asking that question because I thought, okay, what if one day I get somebody that I have, misunderstood, and actually they're not the right fit, I have no idea how to go through the process of like trying to either train them up or push them out or whatever. It's like, yeah, this is quite a useful therapy kind of session to get those thoughts from you guys on that kind of thing. Though hopefully it never becomes necessary.
Yeah, hiring slow, right?
All right, well, that wraps it up for this episode. Thanks for watching or listening. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give the video a like. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about how to hire a YouTube team, we actually spoke more in depth in our previous podcast episode, which you can click right here.